wrong to say ladies and gentlemen?
Yeah, I don't say that anymore, for example, in my public talks.
Wow.
But when they introduce me, I just say
humanoids.
Yeah, because why specify gender at all? You just all humans who are out there. So say, yeah. So when I'm introduced, they have explicit instructions to say, instead of ladies and gentlemen, which has a ring to it, right?
Yeah.
A historical sort of legacy feel to it. It's just, please welcome to the stage Neil deGrasse Tyson.
All right, let's move on though, because speaking of upside down, Neil deGrasse Tyson, who once I think was like a fairly decent science communicator before wokeness just took over everything. He was sort of the heir apparent to Carl Sagan, who's one of my heroes. Who was just had such an incredible ability to explain complex things about the cosmos to the masses. He would go on Johnny Carson Tonight Show all the time and explain like unbelievable astrophysics to people in a very decent way that they could deal with while they were going to sleep at 11:30 p.m. Anyway, Neil deGrasse Tyson was supposed to be him, number two, and he's devolved into some sort of like half woke, very confused person. Here he is on the Wild Ride podcast explaining a bit more. We played one clip earlier in the week when he was on with Bill Maher, but he's very confused about all this gender stuff, and well, look at how he's now dealing with his shows.
If it's wrong to say ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, I don't say that anymore, for example, in my public talks.
Wow.
But when they introduce me, I just say
humanoids.
Yeah, because why specify gender at all? You just all humans who are out there. So say, yeah. So when I'm introduced, they have explicit instructions to say, instead of ladies and gentlemen, which has a ring to it, right?
Yeah.
A historical sort of legacy feel to it. It's just, please welcome to the stage Neil deGrasse Tyson. And anyone who hears that is going to be human and react. And so why specify?
I like that, man. I think that I'm done saying ladies and gentlemen.
You want to give this one another shot?
No, I think that was fantastic.
You just retired, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah. I mean,
Ladies and gentlemen, that is a load of bunk. Let's be clear. Nobody's offended by ladies and gentlemen. Even if they were, it's completely ridiculous, and we don't always have to go to the lowest common denominator. Again, this is sort of like the previous clip. It's not that it's the biggest thing in the world, but I think that these are like these little markers in society where we just keep catering to the crazy class, whether it's the media class who lies about people doing good things like Mr. Beast, or the people that are supposed to be our intellects, who are intellectuals, who are just constantly degrading everything. Ian, ladies and gentlemen, offensive, not offensive? Can you tell me as a woman?
Offensive, so I guess so. But I think what's scariest for me is the people of science are the ones diving headfirst into this.
Yeah.
It's one thing to have, weirdo academics on college campuses screaming various things about gender, but when supposed authorities on science, and biology is part of science, the idea that there is sex and that it is different is part of science. When these people are diving headfirst, that's really scary. It's like mathematicians out there. It's like Stephen Hawking announcing that 2 + 2 is 5. That's the same kind of level of what we're talking here. It shows how really insidious gender theory has become, and you've got so many people like Neil deGrasse Tyson who really care more about their popularity and more their attention than basic truth, and so they'll quite happily throw science, their supposed love, into the shredder just to protect their own skin. I think that's really showing how powerful gender theory has become.
CJ, I have a theory that young people actually want older people to tell them the truth. They actually don't want this pandering nonsense anymore. I think it explains a lot of Jordan Peterson's success and many other people, that they can't make sense of the world because the people before them that are supposed to hand them something have decided to shred it up. Does that resonate with you?
Yeah, I think it's definitely true. And once people realize that they've been lied to for a long time, that turns into anger, because who wants to be lied to? And I think what's really interesting to see here, which is why I talk to, oftentimes I get conservative parents who will reach out to me on Instagram or Twitter, and they say, how can I prepare my kid to go to college? I'm like, well, it's biblical, right? You got to train up your child in the way in which they should go so when they're old, they won't depart from it. The problem that we have sometimes as conservatives is that we're so worried about liberal indoctrination that we kind of are like, oh, let's not indoctrinate our kids ourselves before they go to college. And it's like, okay, you don't have to indoctrinate them, but give them a foundation. So when they go to their college campus and they listen to their leftist professor trying to cancel ladies and gentlemen and say that there are 100 genders or that gender is a social construct, they can rely back on those teachings that you gave them as a child and say, this isn't correct, this isn't truthful, this is wrong, and that they will have the courage and conviction to sit there and raise their hand and say, I disagree, because courage is contagious. There are often times when I was in school, and I went to the University of Alabama, which isn't definitely not as progressive as, a UC Berkeley, but sometimes I would be the only person in the class who would raise my hand brain and say, that's just not correct. That's your emotion. You're trying to pass it off as truth. Let's leave this alone. But, particularly in this clip, I think Ian hit it on the head. It's particularly troubling when you have people of science, pushing these farce of an idea, but also too, remember when a PhD used to be a flex, you would respect people who had them because they were
right.
intellectual people. Now it's the last people that I ever want to speak to. It's these people are so just drunk off of their own so-called intellect and just cosmopolitan, ambition to just cater to every single crazy phenomenon these days that they've lost their intellectual integrity. And it's sad because, as you said, Neil deGrasse Tyson, I assume pretty smart guy. You watch that clip and you have doubts about that, though.
And it's not just the intellectuals who've lost their cred, which obviously is true. I would say anyone who's gone to college at this point. We just hired a new editor this week, and I was thrilled when I found out he was a college dropout. I was like, bonus, man. Joey, welcome aboard. CJ, I just want to ask you one other thing, because you mentioned when you were in college and speaking up against the progressive groupthink because you happen to be black. I'm guessing they didn't treat you that well. They kind of took that card away if you spoke up against, it kind of doubles down on the hate against you, right?
Yeah, it was interesting. Thankfully, I had, a really supportive, campus community. And I think it was really proof of what you just said. Young people are tired of being lied to by the progressives, by these people who are so hell-bent on being woke that they are willing to eliminate women out of our society, that they're willing to criminalize being white in America. There are lots of students at the University of Alabama who were standing up against that. My professors, however, sometimes weren't the biggest fan of me. There were people who, condemned me for, being pro-Trump and, during the election and all of these things. But at the end of the day, I think that if you're not getting pushback, that you're not pushing hard enough. And I think that America's young people should know there are far more people that agree with us than don't. We just got to be vocal, and we've got to get over this silent majority nonsense. Being silent is permissive. And if we allow these people to continue to wage a war on every single value that we have as a country, they will win. And so, to your point, that's why we should talk about things like this, these stories, because it's kind of a little bit of a dry run. They test these crazy theories, these crazy ideas to see, will anyone push back? Is this too far? And it makes me, reminds me of Jazz Jennings, her TLC show. No one was talking about it at that point when, she was a kid undergoing gender transition. People kind of looked at it as a human interest story. People weren't really vocal about how bad it was. I think it was around 2010. I was a little kid. But now we're seeing it go mainstream and people are like, oh my God, this is so bad. Well, maybe if we had condemned it back then, we wouldn't be where we are now. So I think it's really important to nip these things in the bud before they grow into even a bigger phenomenon than they already are.